Welcome, everyone. My name's Sam, and I'm going to be speaking with Dr. Andy Neely now in this episode of Balancing the Tensions of Leadership Across the Pond. I have the opportunity and privilege in this conversation to be leading it, of asking questions of Dr. Andy and his background and experience and how he approaches the leadership tensions in the clients and the customers that he works with. So let's start and let's open this space, Dr. Andy, by asking, tell the audience a little bit more about your journey and how you got involved in this pathway and how you've reached the place that you're currently in.
You bet. So Sam, I've been thinking and talking with leaders about balancing the tensions of leadership for probably 25 years now. And if I'm going to be perfectly honest, I think part of it goes back to I just had a couple of bad bosses early on in my career, and I knew that wasn't the way team members should be treated. And one of them wasn't just a bad boss. He was kind of a bad person with anger management issues, and I just had this natural recoil where it was just this injustice gene kind of boiled up inside me and said, man, people, regardless of what he's treating me like, nobody should be treated this way. And that along with my faith, I think really put me on this journey of, what makes a good leader, and how do managers know if they're becoming high performing leaders? And gosh, 25 years later, I've been privileged to finish my dissertation, my doctoral studies on the area of leadership and personal development. And I've written a couple of books and I've got 5 million frequent flyer miles from flying all over the world, working with management teams on developing leadership capabilities. So I think I'm one of those individuals who knows I'm doing what I think I'm supposed to do when I get to help managers reflect on what's it mean to be a high performing leader.
Yeah. And Andy, one of the things that I didn't hear you mention there, but I know my audience need to hear it to understand more about your credibility. You're also the owner of a multi-million-pound business too. So I know that you're not only somebody who's got a doctorate and you completed your dissertation within this space, but you've also got the lived experience. Share a little bit more insight with my audience about your business and what it is that you do in that space too.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you mentioning that because you and I work in a space where we have a lot of people who are successful consultants and keynote speakers and workshop leaders and thought leaders. But the truth of the matter is, Sam, folks like you and me, while we have a legal entity that is a full business, we don't really have businesses. We have thought leadership practices. And there's a difference. I today run an organization that's got well over 100 people in a totally different space. We're a retail facing business here in Central Texas, and we've got frontline customers, and I've got a management team beneath me. And so the thing that I've appreciated over the last 15 years, particularly as these businesses have grown, is recognizing I am no longer talking about problems I know managers have. I'm living the challenges of this tension that managers and leaders live in. And I've had leadership clients of mine say, Dr. Andy, one of the things that really is beneficial when I talk with you is we can tell you're in the trenches with us. You're wrestling with generational differences. You're wrestling with a customer base that's got a shorter fuse than it's ever had. You're wrestling with supply chain issues just like we are. And so, yeah, I think part of the strength that I'd like to believe of my leadership voice is this is not academic theory. This is me finishing up our Zoom discussion today and then diving back into the trenches with some of my managers on issues.
Wow. I'm really pleased you shared that, not only for me, but as I say, to share with my audience. So, Andy, building in that understanding now of your academic expertise, your lived experiences in the trenches, as you just described, share more about how leaders maybe connect with you or they find their way to working with you. How does that relationship develop, or how does it start?
Yeah. When I'm working with management teams, and really the question that I try to help managers answer is, how do I as a manager, or how do my team of managers, how do we know if we're becoming high performing leaders? I used ChatGPT over the last couple of weeks, the AI machine we all have access to.
Yeah.
To ask this AI, how many books have been written on leadership in the last generation? And AI didn't know, because leadership is such a broad topic. This artificial intelligence came back and basically told me nobody can be quite sure what that number is, because leadership is such a broad topic. The challenge of having a manager know if they're leading well or not, Sam, that's really the intersection that I love to dive into. I've been thinking about this stuff for 25 years now, and reading extensively and working with leaders and interviewing managers and management teams. And I think that if I bring any strength to this space, it's that my reflection has allowed me to kind of cut through a lot of the noise. And I will look the management teams I work with in the eye and say, if you want to know if you're becoming a high-performing leader, there's 4 things you've got to be focused on. You've got to be thinking about the future. You've got to be a person of conviction who sees the bigger picture, who isn't just stuck in today or tomorrow, but is thinking about vision and mission and value, and have some passion around what you're doing, that whole area of conviction. The second area that defines a manager who's becoming a high-performing leader is the area of competence. Can they get their teams to execute? Not just in terms of, are you a frontline executor, but now can you create an environment where the people around you are free to bring their best to the environment, to the mission of the organization? So that whole area of competence. Wiley, in one of their research articles, talks about the ability of managers to get their teams to execute. And a good manager is becoming a better and better leader if their teams are excelling at execution. That the third area of these 4 leadership necessities, Sam, is the area of character, the one that I think you and I kind of naturally resonated on when we connected in Dublin last year. And just the quality of who you are, Sam, came out even in our brief introductions at first. Stephen Covey, more than 20 years ago, said, people join organizations for the job. They leave because of their boss. Well, if a manager wants to know, am I becoming a high-performing leader? Are you the type of person, fair-minded, honest, other-oriented, balanced? Do you have control of your emotions? Is there a maturity there? That whole character issue. And then the 4th leadership necessity, Sam, I struggled with this one. Quite honestly, I've struggled with the language around this one for years. As I looked at high-performing leaders, at first I said, well, they're excellent communicators. They're connected with their team members. The word that I really recognized was reflected in these best leaders that I was working with. It's an old-fashioned word, Sam. It's the word covenant. And the interesting thing about this 4th C, we've got conviction, we've got competence, we've got character, and now we have covenant. Sam, here in Texas, where I live in the States, if someone should want to get married, they enter into a marriage covenant. And a marriage covenant really includes 2 aspects. There's the love and affection. I want to spend the rest of my life with you, and the romance that's involved with that. There's a personal connection. But at least here in the state of Texas, there's also a formal document that's signed by an officiant and recorded by the Secretary of State that makes this a binding agreement. When I look at good leaders, there is a personal side of their leadership. There's empathy, there's compassion, there's conviction. Sam, you and I both worked with leaders where, completely unbeknownst to their organization or anybody else, that team member had 6 weeks of PTO because of something going on in their life, because it was the right thing to do. There was a personal connection. But the good leaders I work with also balance that with, you know what, I have a formal responsibility to maintain the stewardship of the organization. We're driving for success. I can't just be nice to everybody. I've got to be kind while I drive hard. And so the best language around that I found really was covenant, this tension of a personal relationship and a formalized, goal-oriented. So these 4 leadership necessities, really, Sam, that's my voice around leadership. Most of the time, clients, their initial work with me is around a half-day workshop where I'm going to work with a team of managers on recognizing how to develop these 4 leadership necessities.
Right. And then tell me a little bit more about what then unfolds from there. And did you find that the managers then become very sort of aware of it and then they're able to take it forward? Or did it take a longer level of implementation? You start working with groups or individuals out of those groups for longer periods of time? Tell me more about how that structure works out.
I mean, it's all over the place because some people, like I can even see it as you and I have talked some, as I'm sharing with you these 4 leadership necessities, you're nodding your head. You get it, Sam.
Yeah.
They just make sense, right? It's an easy construct. And for some leaders I work with, it's like, oh, I get it. I've just been looking for that. And they're off to the races. Oftentimes I end up working with my client organizations for a year or 18 months or even 2 years, where it's a series of workshops where we go more deeply. I've got a self-assessment tool that I'll put leaders through that will help them reflect on these 4 leadership necessities and where am I at and where can I get stronger. So oftentimes an initial half-day workshop with a team will be identifying the 4 leadership necessities and doing some reflection on those. The second time I work with them, they will take an assessment ahead of time, and then we'll come and we'll talk about specific individual strengths and weaknesses and action planning. We also work a lot on leadership conversations because in some respects, these 4 necessities are played out day to day in the conversations managers have with their team members and with the people that they're seeking to influence. So we'll talk about holding hard conversations. I do a lot of work with organizations who want to help their managers hold developmental coaching conversations. Importance of the affirmation conversation. The QR code that sits off my shoulder here is actually a download of the 3 imperative leadership conversations that every manager needs to be holding with their team members if they're becoming a leader. And so that's the type of work that I do, oftentimes through a series of half-day workshops over a 6-month or a 12-month or even an 18-month period. And the interesting thing, my professional and personal coach developing over the last couple of years out of that, I've begun to do individual one-on-one coaching with some of the leaders that I'm working with as well. Spinning out of some of this work will be people saying, great, now can you and I work together for 3 or 4 months because I'm really struggling with executive presence, with that whole ability to command the room, the conviction piece. Or Andy, you talked about being able to read a balance sheet, and I'm not real strong in that. And part of what I have now is financial responsibilities. Can we go deeper in that competence area? And can you coach me a bit? So I've been doing more one-on-one coaching, Sam, in the last couple of years than ever before.
Yeah, and I really sense your energy into that space, Andy. I think that feels really passionate, really interesting. Andy, I'm also mindful to share and acknowledge that you and I met at the Global Speaker Summit in Dublin last October. So it'd be wrong of me to not sort of ask you some questions about your speaking side too. And tell us a little bit more, share with my audience, Andy, what it is that you speak on and when you are on the platform, again, what sort of conversations you're having from that space too.
Yeah. Well, they all are tied to leadership again. It's just what I think I'm supposed to do when I'm on planet Earth is help personal leadership development. So all of us are leaders because we're all trying to be people of trust and influence. So oftentimes I'm doing a keynote for a trade association or for a company kickoff meeting, and I will be the opening night keynoter. I'm working with a banking organization next month here in the US for their annual meeting, and I will be doing the keynote. As you know, I've written a couple of books. The little bestseller that I've written is called The Golden Principles, Life and Leadership Lessons from a Rescued Dog. I have a golden underfoot right now. My wife and I have rescued 10 Goldens over the year of our marriage. And gosh, 10 years ago now, Amazon fell in love with my little book of stories about dogs and the leadership lessons they teach us, how to get down to the level of the people you're trying to befriend, and how a positive yes is always better than a negative no, and how it takes time to build trust. Oftentimes, Sam, I'm asked to come in and really share one of my golden principles stories that's got personal leadership, poignant personal leadership application. And then as is the case next month, I'm doing a keynote, the opening night of the meeting. And then the next day, I'm doing a half-day workshop for the managers that are going to be at that meeting on these 4 leadership necessities. And they fit well together because they're all my voice. The golden principles, if you would, are principles of leadership.
Yeah. Andy, it's such a wealth of knowledge, insight, but also material and content that you've shared. And so I encourage my audience to reach out and do further research into that space. It's so valuable. And Andy, if you were to be able to speak to the leaders that are listening today, that maybe in my audience or in your audience, and you've watched this space, if you were to be able to offer them a top tip or value, if they're currently balancing the tension of leadership, or maybe they feel like they need the development in that space, what would you say to them, or what would you encourage them to consider today?
Wow, great question. You know, I'd probably say two things. The first one I've borrowed from a lot of other good thought leaders, but there's nothing new in leadership. Marcus Aurelius and Jesus Christ had it all said, 2000 plus years ago. I think the first thing I'd say is your leadership matters. As leaders go, so go organizations. And so you and I have a high responsibility, if we are managers, of serving the people underneath us well. And so that would be the second thing. First thing, your leadership matters. And the second thing is, from the outside, people have a misunderstanding that leadership means you're at the top of the pyramid. Managers who really understand what it means to be a high-performing leader realize, no, I'm at the bottom of the pyramid. And my best day is when I can serve my people well enough that they can do their jobs more effectively, that they can develop who they are and become richer and fuller as workers, but also as human beings and people. So your leadership makes a difference.
Wow. Andy, I'm blown away. That was amazing. Thank you so much for offering that value to the audience that are listening today. And thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate your insights into your background experience, but also what you've shared there. So I'll call it a day and wrap up the conversation there. But again, Andy, thank you for your time. Thank you for the insight. And I look forward to speaking again soon.
Yeah.
All the best. Take care, Andy. Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Take care.